This clash between Michael and Brian wasn't overlooked. Their confrontation had grown too fierce, too loud, too destructive to ignore when the teachers watched from above with a bird's-eye view of the island. 9 out of 10 supervising instructors reached the same conclusion: for the stability of the exam, Michael needed to be removed. Only one thought differently: the very teacher from the academy Michael had chosen to join. To him, this was not a threat but an opportunity. With his undead to anchor his defense and his sheer combat ability to push outward, Michael could turn this exam into his stage, fortifying his keep while sweeping across the island, crushing opponents and claiming points in a relentless rampage. At his current level, there were few, if any, who could stand against him. As for the possibility of Michael clashing with other students bound for the same academy, the teacher hardly cared. At a first-rank academy, quality outweighed quantity. One extraordinary student was worth far more than 100 ordinary ones. It was precisely this ruthless standard that kept their academy at the top. Unlike lesser institutions, they did not gamble on numbers. What puzzled him, however, was the source of Michael's strength. For a necromancer, his combat power defied logic. He didn't seem to have crippled himself by abandoning his class's foundation. Yet nothing about this level of power should have been possible. The teacher's thoughts drifted to the only explanations that fit. Either Michael possessed a hidden class he didn't reveal, or he carried a body-strengthening talent of rare and terrifying caliber. Either possibility placed Michael above most candidates. Either was enough to mark him as someone worth more than the rest combined. What happens when examiners with such authority form thoughts like these? Perhaps it seemed like nothing. But under the rule that governed the land of origin, their intentions carried weight. Enough to shape the trial itself. At first, the quest given to Awakeners had been simple: defend their castles. After all, surviving to the end was considered the true benchmark to passing. Even if one destroyed another's keep, it was holding their own afterward that marked a true pass. The system reflected that balance. But when the teacher's will shifted, so too did the exam. A ripple passed across the island. More than 1,000 participants froze as their panels flickered, the text reshaping itself before them: destroy Castle 37, objective, eliminate Castle 37 within 1 hour. Reward, 60 million experience points, 5 level-ups, and plus 40 attribute points to all stats. When the Awakeners saw their panels shift, they were stunned beyond measure. They didn't even know of Castle 37, and now they were ordered to destroy it. But the real shock wasn't the objective, it was the reward. 60 million experience points. 5 level-ups. 40 free attribute points across the board. The island seemed to hold its breath. Awakeners were greedy by nature, yes, but greed didn't make them fools. For a prize like this, the danger had to be equally staggering. The panel might as well have been screaming, "Beware." What they didn't know was that this was already the system's restraint. The quest hadn't named Michael directly. It hadn't told them to eliminate him. It had only marked his castle. If it had been otherwise, if the target had been Michael himself, the reward would have been enough to tempt even rank 3 Awakeners. But the system knew what most of them didn't. It knew Michael's strength. And so the reward was balanced against him. Commotion spread like wildfire among the students. Some stared at their panels in silence, unwilling to even try. Others exchanged hungry, fever-bright looks, already planning how to converge on Castle 37. It was then that some realized something crucial. This mission wasn't limited to a single participant. Any number of Awakeners could accept it, and as long as Castle 37 fell within the hour, everyone who had accepted would receive the reward, whether they had fought tooth and nail or merely shown up at the right time. The realization spread like lightning. For a heartbeat, the island seemed to fall into silence, a strange, heavy peace reigning where chaos had once buzzed. Moments later, under the eyes of the 10 teachers, who noticed the odd shift but could not yet discern its cause, the strangest sight unfolded. Large groups of students began to move in the same direction. Not toward scattered keeps, not hunting each other, but converging in eerie unity. Their destination was clear. Apparently, the system had even provided a map for convenience. Awakeners were greedy. The panel had promised them what amounted to months, perhaps even years, of advancement in one stroke. 5 levels, dozens of attributes, and more experience than most could dream of earning in so short a time. That didn't mean they were reckless, though. To avoid leaving themselves vulnerable, many left defenders behind to guard their castles. But the bulk of their forces, they surged toward Michael's keep like a tide. As for Michael, he was back inside his castle. A deep frown etched across his face as he reread the 2 panels hovering before him for what felt like the 100th time. The first read, Quest, defend your castle, objective, defend your castle for 1 hour, reward, plus 30 to all attributes, 2 level ups, plus 40 free attribute points. The second, Quest, Defiance, objective, eliminate at least 30 fan-tram of the castles on the island within 1 hour. Reward, plus 50 to all attributes, for level-ups, plus 50 free attribute points. There were no experience points listed. Strangely, that absence came as a small relief to Michael, though it didn't improve his mood. 2 questions gnawed at him. 1. Why did he have to defend his keep? Who or what was attacking it? And 2. Did he have to end the trial with his own hands? Malice. That was what it felt like, as though the world itself conspired against him. But Michael was an Awakener, and Awakeners were greedy for strength. He was no exception. Especially when it seemed both quests could be accepted simultaneously. Though confusion lingered, Michael noticed neither quest carried a failure penalty. That alone made his choice easier. He accepted both, and then waited. It didn't take long. The moment his will confirmed the quests, his senses stirred with incoming signatures. First dozens, then hundreds, then more. 100. 200. 500. 1,000. The numbers kept climbing as his awareness swept 10 kilometers outward. More than 1,000 students had gathered, stopping 5 kilometers from his location, and still more signatures flickered into his range. Yet none dared draw too close. They lingered, circling, as though waiting for something. Michael's eyes narrowed. He wasn't a fool. Now he understood why the system had given him such quests, even if the root cause was still hidden from him. Unease stirred in his chest, but panic never came. Instead, he drew in a deep breath, infusing mana into his voice until it boomed like thunder across the land. Since you're already here, Michael's voice echoed for several kilometers, come and face me. Why hide? The sound of Michael's voice rolled over the treetops like a struck bell, thick with mana. Hundreds of Awakeners flinched. Hearts lurched. Was that the target? Someone whispered. He sensed us from this far, another hissed. We stayed 5 kilometers out. A ripple of unease spread. For many, the shock wasn't just the force in the words, it was the voice itself. Young. Too young. A good number of them still didn't connect the quest to a fellow candidate. In their minds, the 10 first-rank academies had simply dropped some test objective with an absurd payout for anyone strong enough to claim it. But the call had exposed them. Hiding made no sense now. Then, in eerie, collective purpose, the tide moved. High above, the 10 instructors felt a throbbing unease. They wanted to stop what was going on, but before they could act, their vice principals told them to hold back. They had even been ordered to remove the flying restraint formation on the island. They didn't know why, but they felt something huge was about to happen. Inside Castle 37, Michael's lips pressed to a hard line. The sense-net he'd cast pulsed, painting the outer ring of his awareness with a dense halo of signatures. 1,000. And counting. They were holding at the 5-kilometer mark no longer. Lines began to crawl forward. He breathed slowly. Though he was strong, he was only one man. The death of his undead also made him realize that he and his legion were still far from powerful. These quests also made him wonder what to do. He wasn't scared, because he knew how powerful his trump cards were. But did he want to reveal them? It was when this thought came to him that another followed. Why couldn't he reveal them? After all, this was his true strength. Also, when he thought of it, what was the use of holding onto trump cards that in the nearest future would turn into regular strength? When this thought came, for the first time in a long while, Michael felt free. He seemed to have made a certain decision. The sky darkened, not with storm clouds, but with bodies. Hundreds of Awakeners hovered above Castle 37. Below them, Michael hovered above his castle, 15 undead below him. From this height he looked. Boxed in. Mana pressure stacked on mana pressure until the air rang like taut wire. 1,000 eyes fixed on one man. Michael's gaze drifted over them, unhurried. Any of you having second thoughts? Silence stretched, then a snort from the front rank. A spearwoman in slate armor glared down her nose at him. We don't know what trick you think you've got, pretty boy, but against thousands. It's useless. Murmurs rolled, agreement, derision, a few nervous laughs. More than a few were startled that the guardian of Castle 37 was a fellow student, and so young. Handsome, even. But they didn't buy that he was the reason the quest was labeled like a calamity. Surely the difficulty came from something else. Michael's mouth quirked. Okay, then. A small coffin appeared in front of him and they all tensed. Michael raised 2 fingers. Immediately, 2 figures appeared beside him. One was dark and had feathered wings. The other was tall, had 2 sharp teeth threatening to leave his mouth and a huge bat-like wing behind him. The pressure slammed down like a mountain, a suffocating weight that made the very air groan. Mana surged so violently it warped space itself, bending light into shimmering distortions that rippled outward from Castle 37 like shockwaves. The invisible force wasn't merely felt, it pressed against flesh and bone, a tangible storm of energy that clawed at them. Even seasoned Awakeners, those who had weathered battle after battle, found their chests tightening as though an unseen hand gripped their ribs. Hundreds faltered mid-flight. The sky, once filled with confidence and noise, turned tense, quiet, and fearful. The 2 new figures didn't roar. They didn't posture. Their mere presence was enough. Gale and Lucky. For the first time since their awakening, they stood revealed before public eyes. Michael's voice cut through the trembling silence, firm, calm, absolute. Clear everything on this island. The words were not shouted. Mana carried them, and every Awakener within kilometers heard them as clearly as if whispered in their ears. Gale's wing snapped once, a hurricane's edge exploding outward. The students hovering above had thought Michael trapped. But now, boxed in or not, it was the hunters who suddenly felt like prey. And Michael. He simply raised his spear and pointed it skyward. The sky convulsed as Gale moved. The winged undead didn't hesitate. With a single beat of his enormous wings, the air shattered into a cascade of pressure waves. Wind howled like blades, every gust carrying shards of condensed mana that sliced through the formation of Awakeners above. Gale didn't let up, wave after wave of mixed attacks poured out of him, compressed wind lances and raw slashes of mana that tore through the very sky. The disciplined formations of the flying Awakeners broke instantly. Some raised barriers, others countered with their own spells, but it was like throwing sand against a flood. Entire clusters of students were flung aside, screaming as they plummeted from the air. Shock hit the gathered Awakeners like a hammer. They had come expecting something else. At worst, they thought they'd face some nasty tricks or hidden trump cards. But this was something else entirely. The pressure radiating from Gale and Lucky was suffocating, enough to make even battle-hardened candidates feel their lungs seize. The sheer weight of it made their own power feel small, flimsy, like sparks against a wildfire. And suddenly, the reward made sense. 60 million experience points. 5 levels. 40 attributes across the board. It wasn't generosity, it was compensation. A warning wrapped in temptation. The system had known what they would face here. The reason the reward was so outrageous was simple. Castle 37 wasn't just another keep to topple. It was a calamity. Voices rose in disbelief and fear, panic breaking their unity. This is insane. That's a rank 3 undead. 2 of them. That's impossible. Who the hell is this guy? Eyes turned downward. To Michael. To the calm figure hovering above his keep, black spear angled casually toward the heavens, gaze steady as if the army above was nothing but passing shadows. For the first time, many realized the truth. The guardian of Castle 37 wasn't some fabricated challenge. It was him. A fellow candidate. A necromancer, no less, commanding monsters that had no business appearing in an entrance exam. Fear rooted deep. Now they understood why the quest was so rewarding. The system wasn't bribing them. It was paying them to risk their lives against someone who should not exist at this stage. Michael remained still, hovering above his keep with his spear lowered, eyes sharp. He didn't interfere, didn't rush. He only watched, measuring the tide of destruction Gale was unleashing, his senses stretching far beyond the castle. As for his other undead, he placed them back into the coffin. Lucky, on the other hand, had vanished. Michael had 2 missions. Defending was left to him. Attacking was left to the 2 rank 3 undead. One focused here, while the other targeted areas elsewhere. Lucky's focus was the whole island. Since he decided to play big, Michael played big. Since others dared to show him malice, he'd return the favor. Gale turned the sky into a grinder. Every beat of his wings birthed another wall of pressure, a heaving curtain of wind that shredded everything in its path. Barriers ballooned, buckled, and burst, elemental bolts were torn off course and hurled back into their casters. A trio of knights tried to dive through the gale, feathers flicked, and a wind lance stitched them from shoulder to hip, sending them spinning like broken kites. Fall back. Regroup. The order never finished. Gale tilted one pinion and the air itself corkscrewed, a roaring funnel that vacuumed a dozen Awakeners in a certain direction. Their cries pinwheeled together, then vanished under the howl as the vortex spat them earthward in a rain of bodies and broken gear. Panic detonated. Higher. Get above it. They tried. The sky wouldn't let them. Gale's pressure climbed with them, an invisible ceiling that crushed shoulders and spines. Those who forced speed found the air thickening around their ankles like wet sand. Those who slowed were swatted from the air by crescent slashes that arrived first as a hiss, then as pain. Only then did the truth dawn in full. This was disparity in rank. Why can't I move? Keep casting. Keep, their voices broke under the next blast. Gale folded his wings, dropped like a meteor, and unfurled with a thunderclap. The shock front rolled through hundreds, flipping them belly up. A net of razor-thin currents zipped across the stragglers. One battlemage poured everything into a prism shield. It held for a heartbeat, then spiderwebbed and atomized, the backlash pitching him like a stone. Far from Castle 37, a different storm walked on 2 legs. Lucky moved through the forest in his human guise. The first keep was soon ahead of him. Awakeners stood on its walls, glancing skyward toward the distant uproar where Gale was carving the heavens. Who goes? Lucky exhaled. Green flame cascaded from his mouth in a smooth, unbroken sheet. No roar, no theatrics, just a quiet tide that kissed stone and metal and flesh alike. The fire didn't burn bright, it burned wrong, seeping into seams and pores, crawling under armor like liquid night. Screamers staggered, clutched their throats, and puked smoke. Within 3 breaths, the keep was empty. Another keep. 3 keeps. 5. 7. In the void above the island, 10 figures watched the sky come apart. Gale's pressure. Lucky's green fire. The teachers felt both, muted by distance, yet heavy enough to make their marrow throb. 9 of them went very still. We should have picked him. Damn it. In the void above, 9 teachers cursed under their breaths. A good number of them, if not all, had nothing to do with selecting who out of the final 50 of the previous round the Academy would send an offer. Yet now, watching Castle 37, they couldn't help but wonder who had been so blind as to leave Michael unclaimed. Vermont's Edge, the first-rank academy whose offer Michael had accepted, stood as the lone exception. The teacher's lips curved in quiet satisfaction, his eyes gleaming. To the teacher, this was fortune beyond measure. There was a universal truth in the world: the strong grew stronger. And with Michael's foundation at this stage, already equivalent to 2 teachers combined, what would he become when he reached his peak? It wasn't just Michael who would benefit. By the time he grew strong enough to give back to his academy, so too would Vermont's Edge bask in his rise. The saying echoed in the teacher's heart like a mantra: when the homemaker ascends, even his chickens follow. The others could only gnash their teeth in frustration. Necromancers had limits, yes, bound to the race rank of their undead. But at rank 3, things started to deviate from previously established rules. Rank 3 creatures could cultivate laws, and with each advancement in their laws, their own strength advanced as well. To put it simply, there would come a time when Michael would witness several rank 3 creatures at the 3-star extraordinary rank surpass the supposed limits of their race. In fact, he had already seen it once, beginning. Through his law, beginning had propelled himself all the way to level 70, a threshold that, at least in theory, should only have been accessible to epic rank monsters, even if only temporarily. That was the sheer power of cultivating a law. It was also the reason that, upon reaching rank 3, experience points were no longer shown as raw numbers but as a percentage toward the next level. At the time, Michael assumed it was just a system update to the interface. He hadn't yet realized it signified something far more elusive: the shift away from relying solely on experience points to advance. Of course, experience farming still remained the quickest and most efficient path, but it was no longer the only one. More than that, if a creature advanced its law far enough, it could even raise its life level, improving its race rank as if undergoing a forced evolution. With the right conditions and suitable materials, pushing themselves to evolve wasn't just a possibility. Take the tailed fox, a favorite among beast tamers. By nature, they possessed a weak racial limit, yet their potential was immense. If provided with sufficient evolutionary materials to bring them to rank 3, the cultivation of their law would gradually increase the number of tails they bore, each tail a testament to their advancing power. Of course, none of this diminished the importance of race rank. Was it easy to improve a law through cultivation, let alone push it far enough to force an evolution? Absolutely not. But if a creature's race rank was already high, then the opposite held true: their laws only needed to catch up, and they would naturally advance on their own. With each step forward in law cultivation, those undead would grow stronger, and if their laws advanced far enough, they could even ascend their very race rank. Forced evolution wasn't a fantasy, it was an inevitability if the right conditions and resources aligned. And now, Vermont's Edge had 2 such monsters delivered into their fold for free. The 9 teachers stared at Michael and felt bitterness rise in their throats. Below, Gale's storm raged without pause. Though he held back from invoking his law, Michael had been cautious about risking anything that could truly harm the real bodies of the Awakeners. Their lives were only prolonged by seconds. Even without tapping into his law, the affinity it granted sharpened every gust, every blade of wind, and to devastation amplified far beyond what ordinary students could withstand. Gale was on a relentless kill streak. It was Lucky, on the other hand, who seemed to have calmed down. The reason was simple. It was an acquaintance. Hovering above a castle, Lucky tilted his head, his gaze settling on the lone girl standing before its gates. Her expression was cold, distant, but familiar enough to stir recognition in him despite it being the first time he saw her without his previous black and white vision. To Michael, his master, she had once been a classmate. A girl with an intriguing class, alchemist. Now, she stood at the front of her keep with a black stone cradled in her hands, its surface veined with blue light. A formation stone. Like Michael, Mira had been unfortunate at the start, placed in a castle with only 3 people including herself. Yet her class had given her methods others lacked, and through them, her group managed to avoid being crushed early. As for why she was alone now, it was because her 2 teammates had left her to guard the castle while they chased the newly issued quest alongside the rest. Like the others, Mira had never once connected that quest to another participant. She certainly never would have imagined it linked to someone she actually knew. And the man before her, this cold figure cloaked in human guise, looked nothing like the Lucky she had once known. She had no way of knowing. This final round of the exam, though filled with ups and downs, had actually been easier for Mira than the previous one. Yesterday's trial in the virtual space had left her nearly useless. Her class had been of little value in that artificial battlefield. But fortune had smiled in an unexpected way. After the incident in Woodstone City, she had forged a connection with the manager of the Supernatural Association branch in her new city. Through that connection, word of her rare talent had been passed along to a first-rank academy, which had wasted no time in sending her an offer. If not for that, even with her special class and her hard-earned level 30, achieved only by completing her grueling advancement quest, Mira would likely have been forced to settle for a second-rank academy, or worse, a third. This round, however, had been different. Here, she could finally lean into the true advantages of her alchemist class. Her concoctions, her tools, her formations, they all found their place in real combat. Yet now, standing before her castle with the formation stone pulsing in her hand, Mira felt something she had not even experienced during the demonic supernatural event in Woodstone City. She felt despair. Because the figure hovering above her keep was not some ordinary opponent. Lucky's presence was suffocating. It pressed down on Myra's chest like an iron weight. The mana around her warped in subtle tremors, bending toward him like the forest itself acknowledged his dominion. Her hand clenched tighter around the formation stone until her knuckles turned white, the faint glow spilling across her pale fingers. Her mind screamed at her to act, to hurl the stone down and activate the formation at once. But her instincts betrayed her. They told her the truth her pride refused to accept. It wouldn't matter. The stone might buy her time. A few breaths. Maybe even a minute. But not victory. Lucky moved. Just a step forward, and the air screamed. The world seemed to tear as a lance of green fire streaked from his palm, thin as a spear yet wide enough that the castle gate behind Mira blistered at its passing. Reflex saved her, the stone flared and a translucent wall sprang up before her. The flame kissed it. Blue light warped. The barrier writhed like heated glass, its surface running in ripples as Lucky's fire crawled across it like a living thing. Myra's lips tightened, mana pouring into the stone as she forced the shield to hold. Sweat beaded instantly across her brow. Then came the sound. A low hiss that built into a shriek, as though the barrier itself was being peeled apart layer by layer. The fire didn't just burn, it corroded, eating at the formation like acid. Myra's teeth clenched. No. If only she knew Lucky was holding back due to a temporary delay in judgment due to her identity, who knows what she'll feel. Cracks spidered through the wall, every pulse of green forcing them wider. A heartbeat later, the shield exploded outward in shards of blue light. The blast threw Mira back across the courtyard. She rolled, coughing as her lungs filled with smoke that wasn't smoke, an acrid haze that clawed at her throat and stung her eyes. When she rose, Lucky was already descending. The keep itself groaned as fire licked across its walls, the stone darkening, bleeding light as if its life was being drawn away. Despair clawed at her chest. She had faced monsters before. She had faced horrors in Woodstone City. But this was different. Mira staggered, wiped her eyes, raised the stone again with shaking hands. "How is she?" rasped. Lucky answered by closing his palm. Green radiance folded inward, then snapped outward in a tight cone. The beam punched through the rebuilt barrier as if it were paper, kissed the formation stone, and turned it to drifting ash. The recoil numbed Myra's arm to the shoulder. For a breath she simply stared at her empty palm. Mira looked up. "Sorry," Lucky said, quiet, almost gentle. A final streak of emerald light crossed her vision. The system caught her before the fire did. White latticework wrapped her body, and the exam's emergency extraction flared. She dissolved into motes, whisked out of the trial alive, but defeated. The courtyard fell silent except for the soft hiss of Lucky's flame eating its way into the stone. He turned to the keep itself. A single breath, and green fire poured from his mouth in a smooth arc that slid along walls, windows, and seams. Castle 112 destroyed. Lucky was already gone, blurring into the trees. Castle 089 destroyed. Castle 064 destroyed. Castle 173 destroyed. In high air, the teachers watched the island's map freckle with extinguished sigils. Lucky never hurried, yet he was everywhere. For some that day, he was a nightmare of despair. For a few long minutes, the island sounded like the inside of a storm. Then it ended. Silence. Trees bent and slowly righted. Ash drifted like gray snow. Aside from Michael and his two undead, nothing else on the shattered island still moved. Gale hovered back to his master's side, wings folding, pressure vanishing like a clenched fist opened. Lucky arrived a heartbeat later. Panels bloomed in Michael's vision. Quest: defend your castle completed. Objective: defend your castle for 1 hour. Threshold surpassed. Base reward: plus 30 all attributes, plus 2 level ups, plus 40 free attribute points. Performance bonus applied. Final reward: plus 40 all attributes, plus 4 level ups, plus 40 free attribute points. Michael exhaled, a happy smile showing on his face. Another pane slid into place. Quest: Defiance completed. Objective: eliminate greater than or equal to 30 Fantram of castles in 1 hour. Result: 66 Fantram of castles eliminated. Threshold surpassed. Base reward: plus 50 all attributes, plus 4 level ups, plus 50 free attribute points. Performance bonus applied. Final reward: plus 60 all attributes, plus 6 level ups, plus 50 free attribute points. A warm surge rolled through his body, raw, ordered power snapping into bone and tendon, coiling in his core. Stats climbed. The world sharpened another few degrees. Joy hit him like fresh air after drowning. He didn't whoop or pump a fist. Michael wasn't wired that way, but the grin that cut across his face was unguarded, boyish. This right here was part of why he'd stopped hiding. After his last breakthrough, the limiter the system slapped on him for outlier performance had turned experience points into diminishing returns. If he tried to climb on experience alone, he'd waste weeks for gains that should have taken hours. But quests were different. Do more than the requirements, and the system pays you more. Now, thanks to this opportunity he did not let slip by, Michael was now a level 50 necromancer. A peak rank 2 awakener, just 1 level away from achieving rank 3. 1 more level. Michael didn't know how long the last step would take, but the distance wasn't the yawning gulf it had been at level 40. It felt near. Reachable. Real. Michael glanced at Gale and Lucky. Good work, Michael said softly and summoned the two undead back to his coffin. But before he could turn to check the new panel that appeared, Michael felt his vision shift. The world blinked. Michael opened his eyes to a familiar place. Below him, the same glassy, ink-black water lay perfectly still, a mirror that refused to reflect. Above, black suns hung like holes punched through the sky, bleeding no light, just weight. He drew one slow breath. Before he could fully center himself, the floor of nothing swayed and dropped. Sight and sound snapped back with a soft clap. Stone underfoot. Voices. A wash of mana-like ocean wind breaking across cliffs. He stood in a plaza, but not the one he'd first arrived in. Michael had returned to the Academy's territory in the land of origin. He wasn't alone. Castle 37. That was him. 2 rank 3s, shut up, look, look. Michael didn't care about the whispers. He was wondering what to do next when a pressure brushed his senses. His gaze lifted on instinct. A man stood near the edge of the plaza. Michael didn't recognize the face. But the man recognized him. Their eyes met. He dipped his chin in a small nod and offered a gentle smile before stepping to the rail. "Candidates," the man said, his voice rolling out on a steady thread of mana that brought the plaza to heel without ever turning harsh. "Welcome back to Verant's Edge Academy." The crowd settled. All around Michael, students stood in fresh Academy issue garments. No blood, no soot, no torn sleeves. Only a few were pale around the mouth, and almost all of them avoided looking his way. The ones who didn't hold it long. "I am Instructor Salen of Verant's Edge," the man continued. "On behalf of the 10 academies, congratulations. You have concluded the last trial." Salen let the quiet breathe for a heartbeat longer, then his tone shifted, still even, but carrying a firmer edge. "Due to unforeseen variables in the final trial, many of you were prevented from completing your stated objectives." More than 100 heads turned, most of them, inevitably, toward Michael. He didn't bother returning the looks. Salen didn't rebuke them. He simply continued, "The academies will not pretend the field conditions were typical. Nor will we discard talent. Therefore, a temporary provision is in effect." Murmurs spiked, hope and dread braided together. After resumption, Salen said, "Those who did not meet the passing threshold will receive a probationary assignment. 1 task and a fixed window to complete it. If you succeed, your provisional admission converts to full standing. If you fail, you will be transferred to an appropriate partner institution." The word hung there, transferred. Not expelled. But a fall all the same. "What kind of task?" someone called, too loudly. "Varies by candidate," Salen replied. "You'll be measured against your class, your record, and the resources you'll have access to here. It will challenge you, but it will be achievable." Salen lifted his hand, silencing the whispers that wanted to spill into questions. His tone hardened. "Do not ask me about the specifics. You'll know when you resume. No more questions." The plaza quieted again, tension coiling. He let the stillness settle before shifting topics. "Now, resumption. Just as the Academy holds territory in the land of origin, we also do in the original world. In 2 weeks' time, all students will be required to report. You will receive the coordinates of your assigned campus soon. That will be your entry point in the real world." Mana rippled subtly with his words, carrying them to the very edges of the plaza. "During those 2 weeks, prepare yourselves. When you step through our gates in the original world, your life as Academy disciples begins in earnest. What follows next will be revealed to you there." Students glanced at one another, unease mixing with excitement. Salen gave a single nod, his eyes sweeping the crowd once more. "That concludes this assembly. You are dismissed." His voice dropped just enough for only some to catch the last line. "Michael Norman, remain." The plaza lit in flashes of white. In an instant, more than 100 figures dissolved into light and vanished. When the brilliance faded, silence returned. Michael stood alone in the open plaza, with only Salen's calm gaze resting on him. Michael adjusted himself. "Sir," he said, his voice even, "may I ask why I was told to remain?" Salen's expression softened further. "Because you are our top newcomer." His smile lingered, warm in a way that made Michael shift his weight uncomfortably. The man's gaze carried no malice, yet something about it made the back of his neck itch. For a split second, Michael had to bite down on the impulse to blurt out, "I don't swing that way." He swallowed it, jaw tightening, and kept his silence. Salen continued smoothly, as if unaware of the awkwardness. "You've done something extraordinary. Few in the Academy's history have stood where you stand at your age, with what you command. Recognition is due, and others." Michael inclined his head. "Others?" "Yes." Salen clasped his hands behind his back, his tone measured but deliberate. "Though you have 2 weeks, I advise you to come at least a week earlier. Don't wait until the last day." Michael's brows drew together. "Why?" Salen's smile faded into something more serious. "Because the principal has requested to see you. Personally." The words fell into the silence between them like a stone into still water, sending ripples through Michael's thoughts. The principal of a first-rank academy. Salen let the weight of it linger before adding, "That is not an honor given lightly. Don't waste it." Michael's heart paused for a beat. The principal of a first-rank academy. If the vice principal was a rank 5 Awakener, then this person was at least in the same rank or higher. And they wanted to see him. Only matters relating to rank 3 and above captured Michael's attention now. Anything less simply felt insignificant. Yet, Michael wasn't arrogant enough to ignore the truth. No matter how much potential or power he had now, the current him couldn't compare to a rank 5 Awakener. Hell, even some rank 3s could probably suppress him. The fact that someone of that caliber wanted to see him made his skin prickle with unease. Salen seemed to catch the flicker of confusion in his eyes, though not the storm of his thoughts. His voice gentled. "Don't read too much into it. I, too, don't know the principal's exact reason for summoning you early." He paused, studying Michael. "I have my suspicions, but I wouldn't dare claim certainty." "The principal's mind." Salen shook his head faintly. "Isn't something even we, his instructors, presume to guess?" Michael inhaled slowly, forcing the tension from his shoulders. "I understand." "Good." Salen's tone eased again. "Exercise patience. You'll have your answers soon enough. Until then, prepare. I hope to see you in real life soon." Michael gave a respectful nod, though inside his thoughts churned. Salen wasn't finished. His eyes lingered on Michael with a faint glimmer of intent as he added, "One more thing. Though it won't be immediate, in due time your access level in the Supers Forum will be raised by 1. Michael blinked. "Access level?" "Yes," Salen confirmed with a small nod. "Not your member level, don't mistake the two. Your membership level will still rise the usual way, through rank. What this does is grant you broader access to information." That caught him off guard. Michael had always assumed the only way to climb in the forum was through raw progression, his Awakener rank dictating what information the system allowed him to see. That the Academy could adjust this directly. That was new. Michael didn't bother hiding the flicker of surprise across his face. Salen seemed to have expected it. "This is one of the benefits of joining an academy, Michael. Be it an Awakener Academy or a Cultivation Academy." Michael nodded faintly, but inwardly his thoughts wandered. Cultivation academies he could understand. Cultivators had techniques, methods, things naturally suited to institutions of learning. But Awakeners, they weren't bound to manual traditions. Their growth came from things like system quests and experience points. What need did they have for classrooms? That was why, from the start, Michael had suspected the term academy was misleading. For Awakeners, this place might function less like a school and more like an organization. A gathering point of power, resources, and connections, its true purpose veiled by the name. Maybe, with his forum access soon to rise, he'd finally glimpse the truth behind the academies. Michael inclined his head once more. Understood. Salen gave a nod, but then his eyes sharpened as if he'd remembered something. One last matter, he said. I am aware of the loss of your undead in the trial. Michael's expression didn't shift, though a small weight stirred inside his chest. Salen's tone lightened, almost casual. Don't trouble yourself over it. The Academy will see to compensation. That is the norm. And in your case, given the performance you displayed, I imagine the package will be considerably more generous than usual. Michael's gaze flicked to him, caught between curiosity and caution. In fact, Salen went on, his lips curving in the faintest tease, if you tally the Academy points you earned today and add them to whatever resources come as compensation, you may find this loss becomes a hidden opportunity. Michael didn't rise to the tease. He let the words pass with a neutral look, pretending not to catch the undertone, though his mind was already turning. Salen's voice lowered slightly, a thread of warning beneath the mildness. A word of advice, be careful with your academy points. They are not currency to be squandered. Their value runs deeper than you might yet understand. Michael inclined his head, masking his interest. Outwardly, he was calm. Inwardly, the information both surprised and delighted him. He hadn't known the academies handled such matters directly, much less with this level of investment. He didn't know yet what form the compensation would take, but he had expectations. This was a first-rank organization. Whatever they provided, it wouldn't be something shady or useless. I'll keep that in mind, Michael said finally, his voice even but respectful. Thank you. Salen gave one final nod. Good. Then be on your way, Michael. Hopefully, we'll see one another in a few days. Michael straightened, meeting the man's gaze squarely. I'll make sure. That earned him a genuine smile from the instructor. Salen kept his eyes on Michael as his body blurred into radiance, then dissolved into strands of light that slipped out of the plaza. For a moment, Salen stood alone in silence, the smile still lingering. Then it faded. His brows furrowed, and the weight of unspoken thoughts pressed across his face. If every supernatural were as strong, or even close to Michael Norman, then the thousand-race war wouldn't corner. The idea made his chest tighten. Aurora's survival strategy had always been defense, the great turtle shrinking into its shell, waiting for storms to pass. But with too many outliers like Michael rising, the tide could shift entirely, opportunity and danger merging into the same blade. He exhaled through his nose, the frown easing into resignation. No, rather than worrying, it's better to focus on my own strength. If the sky falls, there are stronger ones than me to hold it up. Yet even as he said it, his mind drifted. He thought of some special beings. Not all on Michael's level, perhaps, but not inferior in every aspect either. A few might even surpass him in certain paths. Salen's lips moved, voice low, more to himself than to the empty plaza. If the older generation cannot endure, then the new must surpass them. The words lingered in the air like a quiet oath, before the Rank 3 instructor finally turned and walked away. Michael had no idea of the teacher's thoughts. When his vision steadied again, he was back in the quiet, familiar walls of Thornvale. He found himself standing in the center of the chamber. For a heartbeat he didn't move. Then, almost by instinct, his steps carried him toward his chair. His palm brushed the surface of the desk, fingers dragging across the wood as if to anchor himself in the present. The exam had demanded little of his body, but his mind was another matter. The cascade of events left a heaviness behind his eyes. That, and the loss. 2 undead. Michael let out a slow breath, lowering himself into the chair. The familiar creak of its frame grounded him. For a while he didn't move, his hand still on the desk, his eyes half closed. However, it didn't take long for Michael to sit up straighter with a faint smile tugging his lips. For all the unexpected turns, what he had gained outweighed what he had lost. The undead would be compensated. Salen had all but promised it, and Michael didn't doubt the Academy's ability to follow through. But what thrilled him most wasn't this. When he had advanced to rank 2, Michael had expected the climb to be slow. The number of experience points he needed, and his undead needed, was massive. Worse, the limiter that throttled how much EXP he could harvest meant his progression would always lag behind. Peak rank 2 already. The realization still seemed impossible, but it was nothing but the truth. A fact. Barely days after stepping into rank 2, he was already at the peak. Michael's delight flared, sharp and unrestrained for once. He couldn't deny the thrum of triumph in his chest. The kind of leap others would take years was met in days. And with that, a thought snapped into place. Since he was now at peak rank 2, the next step forward was rank 3. Michael's eyes lit with intent. For the first time since reaching level 50, Michael turned his focus to his class advancement quest. The panel flared to life before him. Class advancement quest, Quest 1, have 5 rank 3 undead. Quest 2, cultivate a law. Michael froze. 2 quests. This was the first time the system had ever shown him such a thing, and for a breath it unsettled him. But when he thought about it again, his surprise eased. Rank 3 wasn't just a step forward. From everything he had witnessed, it was the threshold where supernaturals turned into something else entirely. The first real transformation. A level where the word supernatural wasn't just a title but a truth. And every path reflected that. Whether it was cultivators or awakeners like himself, below this level, there were wild gaps in strength. One system might seem superior, another inferior, advantages tilting one way or the other. But once they reached rank 3, all of them became terrifying. Differences remained, yes, but each path became valid. Each carried weight. In that light, it made sense. It was as if the system itself was saying, to step beyond, you must prove yourself. 5 rank 3 undead. And a law. Michael exhaled slowly, eyes fixed on the panel. The first task might be daunting for any other awakener, but not for him. A quest like this couldn't be easier. Michael wasn't surprised by its content either. He already knew that from the very first class advancement quest, one could usually glimpse the shape of the ones to come. It wasn't set in stone, but it was more or less reliable. As for this particular quest, Michael had already completed it before it even appeared. After all, he already had 5 rank 3 undead. Lucky, Gale, Beginning, Lucy, and Prince. Unfortunately, had this been the only requirement, and had he been satisfied with just this level of effort, he would have ascended to rank 3 immediately. Even if he aimed higher, Michael dared to say that within half a year he'd achieve it regardless. There was a second quest. Cultivate a law. That was another matter entirely. His mind flashed to Gale's storm, Lucky's crushing weight, Beginning's peculiar radiance. Michael leaned back in his chair, lips pressing into a thin line. Though Michael knew of the existence of laws, he also knew enough to understand how distant they were from him. From everything he'd seen, cultivating one wasn't something done casually. Just because 5 of his undead possessed laws didn't mean it was any easier for him. That was the cruel irony. Their laws were born of his cheat-like talent, not from his own cultivation. If not for infinite evolution, they wouldn't have touched such heights this early. Unfortunately, Michael couldn't advance in rank through evolution the same way he evolved his undead. If it were otherwise, if he could treat himself as one more subject of his talent, then he would have been assured, within half a year, rank 3 would be in his hands. The first step toward cultivating a law was far from Michael, a distant peak shrouded in mist. Yet he wasn't crushed by it. He believed that if others could reach rank 3, then so could he. It would only be a matter of time, effort, and opportunity. Still, he knew that because of this requirement, his advance would not be swift. This wasn't a hurdle he could brute force. Michael exhaled, his gaze lingering on the panel. The system had laid out his road forward, and for the first time since he awakened, an advancement quest looked steep. But he didn't flinch. If rank 3 demanded more, then he would meet it. Michael let his concerns fade for now. His mind was already pulling him in another direction. His level had jumped by 10 during the exam. Not only had his stats climbed from the raw levels themselves, but with the completion of quests stacked on top, his attributes surged even higher. And then there were the free points, hundreds of them, sitting unused, waiting for him to decide where to pour them. Status, Michael murmured. The panel bloomed before his eyes in threads of blue light, neat lines of text rearranging themselves into order. Name, Michael Norman. Rank, 2, max. Talent, infinite evolution. Gift, mark of origin. Title, first in history. Outliner. Class, master necromancer. Attributes, strength, 592. 75, plus 100, agility, 632, 71, plus 100, constitution, 640, 92, plus 100, intelligence, 755, 92, plus 100, attribute points, 340. Michael leaned back in his chair, studying the numbers after excluding the ones his class and race gave him with sharp eyes. The jump was staggering, even to him. If not for his soul growing stronger, granting him finer control over his body, a perk Michael had only discovered after advancing to rank 2, who knew what chaos his unchecked strength might have caused. Even now, his control was far from perfect. Day-to-day movements were manageable, but if he tried to throw a playful punch, he might just end up playfully killing someone. Now, Michael knew his strength could contend with someone deeper into rank 3. However, without a law, raw physicality had its ceiling. Still, he wasn't about to complain. Who would ever say no to more? The higher his attributes climbed now, the more terrifying they'd become once he advanced to rank 3. Perhaps by then, his body would reach an extreme level even within that rank. What made him happier still were the free attribute points. He had started with 150 after his advancement to rank 2 due to advancing 15 levels, 10 points each. Add to that the 90 he earned through quests, and the fresh 100 gained from his recent climb, the total was staggering. 340 free points. Michael let out a low exhale, lips curving slightly. For other Awakeners, even if they hoarded their attribute points, it was rare for them to accumulate to this extent. It was only thanks to Michael's talent that he could afford to do so. Yet, staring at this many points stirred something within him. These points could instantly strengthen him, but what if they could do more? What if he used them in combination with something greater? Michael couldn't help but wonder, if he evolved himself now, and then invested these points, even without advancing to rank 3 yet, would he gain the strength to face rank 3 creatures without relying on his undead? He hadn't forgotten that a high human was comparable to an extraordinary rank creature. If he pushed further, was it possible that his next race might be comparable to an epic-grade creature? The thought alone made his heartbeat quicken. And once it entered his mind, it refused to leave. Maybe, just maybe, this could even be the key to understanding and cultivating a law. Michael knew part of him was likely just searching for a justification. But no matter how he framed it, evolving himself meant gaining more strength. The only real concern was the attention it might draw. Still, after showing his fangs so openly in the exam, Michael found himself less concerned than before. However, he murmured to himself, if I do want to evolve, I need to do it before stepping into the academy. However, even if Michael wanted to evolve himself, he didn't have enough evolution points, nor enough spirit potions to create more. He would need at least a few days to prepare. With a faint exhale, Michael pressed the thought down and let it settle at the back of his mind. After resting for a while and trying out the new spell he got from his increased intelligence, Mana Hand, Michael lifted his hand and summoned forth an item from his soul space. The damaged coffin of the forgotten. The 3-star epic-grade item emerged and Michael's fingers brushed across its surface before he willed himself inside. The coffin's spatial space enveloped him in silence. Michael wanted to use this opportunity to further increase his control over his increased power. He spent hours inside, pushing, adjusting, molding his control into something steadier. The wild surge of attributes that had once threatened to spill from his grasp began to bend to his will. By the time he emerged again, it was already nighttime in Thornvale. Knowing there was nothing else to do here, Michael decided to spend time with a certain taboo undead, increasing his knowledge on what might and might not be useful to him later. 3 hours later, in Aurora, just as dark as Thornvale in the land of origin, Michael received 2 new emails. He sat upright at once. From their headers alone, he knew where they came from. The Awakener Academy and the Supers Association. No surprise there. Michael wasted no time. His finger hovered only a moment before he opened the first one, the one bearing the Academy seal. It was from the Academy itself. A crisp, formal header unfurled. From Verant's Edge Academy, Office of Admissions Subject, welcome to Verant's Edge. Dear Michael Norman, on behalf of the Council and Faculty of Verant's Edge Academy, congratulations on your successful completion of the entrance trials. You are hereby admitted to the incoming cohort. Please review the following campus coordinates. For questions, contact admissions at Verant's Edge. Welcome to Verant's Edge. We look forward to your continued. Office of Admissions, Verant's Edge Academy. It was the customary sort of letter. The only thing that gave Michael pause was the location. The campus coordinates placed Verant's Edge Academy directly in the capital of his country. A small surprise, yes, but nothing more than that. The capital meant little to him. At most, it was just an "oh, so that's where it is" moment, not worth dwelling on. He dismissed the thought easily and turned to the next message. The Supers Association. As Michael's personal journey progressed, so too did the world's. Soon, 3 days passed. A lot had happened in these 3 days. On the land of origin's side, Michael had finally secured full control over Thornvale. The cleanup and repairs were no longer just ideas, they were already being set in motion. Roads were patched, walls reinforced, and the basics of governance reshaped under his hand. Yet Michael knew this was only the beginning. To truly ease the burden on his citizens, he would eventually need to purchase supplies from Aurora and funnel them into Thornvale. For now, though, his focus remained simple, to strengthen the foundation first. If Thornvale's base was solid, then everything else would follow more easily. Even the wolves prowling outside his borders could wait until his house was in proper order. In Aurora, life was quieter, at least, in theory. The truth was, Michael could hardly step outside without being recognized. His sudden rise had turned him into a public figure, and the stares, whispers, and interruptions followed him wherever he went. His first taste of fame was complicated. Unpleasant in its intrusions, but pleasant in the way it affirmed his growth. Michael would never admit it out loud, but he couldn't deny that the recognition stirred something warm in his chest. Still, fame was the least of his concerns. In those days, he had achieved something far more important. Michael had secured another bulk of spirit potions. Not nearly as large as his last haul, which had boosted his evolution points past 8,000, but still enough. By his estimate, this batch would grant him around 2,000 points. And that was enough. Enough to evolve himself. The decision had already been made. Aside from Teacher Brian, no one knew his true race as a high human. But Michael had a feeling this secret wouldn't hold once he stepped into the academy. Rather than arrive there as he was now, he wanted to walk in a new state. Whatever came after, the future Michael would handle it. This evolution would be his step forward now. This wasn't the only thing Michael had accomplished. Thanks to his increased forum access, Michael now knew more than he ever had before. Not everything, of course. The Super's forum wasn't a place that laid out truths on a silver platter, but whenever he searched, answers began surfacing where before there had been walls. And with his current concerns weighing on him, Michael had only focused on two things: what the academies truly were and how one cultivated a law. Like he had suspected, cultivator academies functioned as genuine schools. They trained, instructed, and passed down techniques. But for Awakeners, it was different. Not a school. Not quite an organization either. Something else. A gathering of Awakeners for one purpose. But fight what? That was the question. The answer was uglier up close. It wasn't mere skirmishes but a campaign for dominion. A war so broad that multiple civilizations across the cosmos bled into it. A race war. And the academies, Cultivator and Awakener alike, stood as the Federation's cultivated edge, supplying trained force to defend their realm. Reading that, Michael felt his chest grow heavy. This wasn't some safe simulation. It was a war fought in your real body, with real death at the end of a mistake. Yet he wasn't as afraid as he'd imagined he might be. Maybe it was because of the knowledge of his own strength. Or maybe it was the simple uselessness of fear when the road ahead didn't fork. Either way, the conclusion he'd been circling clicked into place. If the battlefield demanded more than he had, then he would bring more to the battlefield. More strength for himself, not just through his undead. If the academies were garrisons, then rank 3 wouldn't wait for him, he had to chase it. And if evolution shaved a layer off the gap, even before he touched the law, then the choice wasn't really a choice at all. The second half of Michael's search led to a deeper and far more abstract revelation. Law cultivation. It was nothing like mastering a skill. The answer he found came cloaked in philosophy and fragmented explanations. None of them direct, but all circling a singular truth: to cultivate a law was to comprehend a piece of the universe. To take hold of it, one first had to understand it. To observe how a principle governed all things and then, through will and insight, carve a sliver of that order into the soul. It was to study cause and effect until the threads behind reality began to unravel. The more Michael read, the more he realized what separated those who stumbled into laws from those who truly cultivated them. Understanding. Not shallow comprehension, but deep, systemic awareness. The kind that came from peeling back layer after layer until only essence remained. It explained why those who had a profound grasp of their core skills were often the first to brush against law. A swordsman who understood not just the motion of a blade, but the flow of force and the stillness between movements, might glimpse the law of sharpness or the law of cutting. A pyromancer who dissected the birth of a flame, the way heat devoured and light revealed, could reach toward the law of fire. It was knowledge, and it was talent. Knowledge, Michael could accumulate. He could learn the mechanics behind every supernatural he faced. Talent. Talent was trickier. It was what separated a prodigy from the masses. But Michael had long since stopped believing in the fairness of that divide. For him, evolution had always been a bridge across gaps that should have been insurmountable. If talent was what it took, then he would cheat talent itself. What made Michael delighted, though, was that it was said that academies had a way to make the path a bit easier. However, he would need to get there first to see what that opportunity was. Right now, in the space of the damaged coffin of the forgotten, with no undead but only himself inside, Michael downed several bottles of spirit potions, chuckling as he watched the number of his evolution points steadily increase. Ugh, I still can't get used to this. Even if it was your favorite thing, anyone would grow tired of taking the same thing over and over again. Michael hated the sensation, but he was delighted at the sight of his accumulated evolution points, both from the spirit potions he had just consumed and from the amount he had saved up since evolving his spear. Evolution points, 2,721. However, what Michael hadn't expected was that it would take 1,500 points to evolve his race. He had thought that evolving his race would follow the same 5 times multiple rule, where the next evolution would cost 5 times the previous amount. Instead of the 500 he had assumed, it became 1,500. That was 3 times higher than his original estimate. If Michael had been uncertain before about whether this evolution would compare to an epic-grade creature, now he was sure. Still, he prayed this was only for his own race and not his undead. Previously, he had calculated it would take just over 3,000 points to evolve one of his undead to 1-star epic grade. If it actually required 10,000 points each, he felt he might go insane. He truly hoped that wasn't the case. If any other necromancer knew Michael's thoughts, they would spit in his face with disdain. He could at least evolve his undead, even if the cost was steep, but was it truly steep? With his current daily gain, he would need just about 4 months at most to accumulate 10,000 evolution points. An epic-grade creature every 4 months was considered slow. 4 months, not even 0.5% of their lifespan. The ungrateful Michael, the ignorant main character, who at first felt like he had been robbed, soon pushed all distracting thoughts away from his mind. Right now, it was his original body that was inside the coffin space. If he wasn't certain that evolving brought only pain and not death, Michael would never have attempted this. But to avoid calamity caused by evolving, like attracting attention or breaking things, or even harming people, Michael had no choice but to use his original body. Just like in the land of origin, Michael remained extremely cautious about his surroundings in the real world as well. That world mattered more to him for several reasons. Of course, just as he took precautions in the real world, Michael did the same in the land of origin. With the Everlong forest so close, he ventured deep into its depths and had both Prince and Gale guard him, with the former instructed to contain any commotion he caused as much as possible. Michael had a feeling that this evolution wasn't going to be simple. Inside the dome Prince had conjured in the land of origin, Michael summoned his talent and willed it to begin evolving his body. Michael immediately braced for agony. A second passed. Then another. Then a third. Frowning, Michael opened his eyes. What he saw left him stunned. He was no longer in the coffin space. No longer in the dome Prince had raised in the Everlong forest. He stood adrift in a boundless sea of stars. What shocked him more was the sight of a familiar item floating before him. It loomed vast, as massive as a moon. A cauldron. His talent. What's happening? Michael tried to speak, but no sound left his mouth. The cauldron began to tremble. At first, the vibration was faint, like the hum of a distant bell, but soon it grew stronger, sending ripples through the star-filled void. White light seeped from its bronze surface, soft at first, then blinding as if a sun had awoken inside it. Michael blinked against the glow, only to realize something even more unsettling: he was naked. Not in the vulnerable sense, but stripped of everything physical. He could feel his body, and yet it wasn't a body. It was something else. The thought came unbidden, and it made sense. Only, why was his soul here? And more importantly, why was his talent, something that should have been nested deep inside his soul, standing before him as if it had taken on a life of its own? He didn't have time to answer the question. The cauldron's light surged, erupting like a tidal wave. Engravings Michael had never noticed before lit up across its bronze hide: mountains rising, beasts roaring, humans kneeling, gods descending. Each image seemed alive, moving in sequence, like an ancient story unfurling in fragments. Then, all at once, the light burst outward. It rushed into him. His consciousness buckled, his vision blurred. Soon Michael lost consciousness. Or rather, half-lost consciousness. And though his soul floated here, Michael could still feel his body. Then warmth spread through him. It wasn't the sharp tearing agony of every evolution he had seen and the one he endured. Warmth deepened into drowsiness. His eyelids grew heavy, not in body, but in soul. It wasn't his choice, it was an involuntary pull, a tide dragging him down into slumber. Michael struggled, tried to resist, but his will slipped like sand through an open palm. The last thought he clung to made his chest ache. Was it wise to step into this without testing it first? If he had let one of his undead attempt this path before him, he might have known what awaited. Now, all he could do was surrender to the inevitable. The starlit void blurred. The cauldron's engravings pulsed one final time, spilling light across his being. And Michael fell asleep. What Michael did not know was that, outside the starry void, his true body had begun to change. First came the light. Not the blistering flare that once burned the eyes of anyone nearby, but a calm radiance that seeped from his skin, making his whole form look carved from dawn. Then the runes appeared. They rose one by one and started appearing in midair around him. The sight would have been peaceful if not for the mana. It came in quiet floods from every direction. Gale stood at a distance with arms folded and eyes narrowed. Prince kept his hands splayed, maintaining the dome, and let a second shell form inside the first to bleed off pressure. The barrier trembled as if listening. When the mana surge spiked, the dome, embedded with hints of his law, grew thicker by a hair and the forest quieted again. To those who could sense such things, the feeling it gave felt like an opportunity. One that normally only natural treasures gave. Hours slid by, and even Prince could no longer keep the surge fully contained. The dome held, but it hummed like a drumskin under a steady hand. The forest grew watchful. Shapes gathered in the dark. One by one, rank 3 beasts padded out of the trees and took up positions in a loose ring a kilometer out. They didn't do anything and simply watched the dome. If this had happened hours ago, Prince and Gale might not have understood what drew them, but now they did. They could not name the pattern of it, but they could feel it. Michael's change was tugging at the rules behind the world. By standing near him, both Prince and Gale felt their own paths sharpen. Insights that would have taken months to tease apart stood out in bold. It was as if the air around Michael had become a classroom and a shrine at once. The monsters felt it too. But to them, the current Michael was nothing less than a treasure that had not yet been harvested. This was the reason why none of them had attacked yet. They were waiting for him to bloom. Prince adjusted the inner shell and glanced at Gale. They have not moved yet. They will the instant he wakes, Gale said. Inside the dome, runes continued to circle Michael like slow stars. The calm glow on his skin did not fade. Mana streamed in from everywhere, then vanished into him without a ripple. Like this, the first day passed. The dome still held, but the forest outside had grown heavy with eyes. The number of rank 3 monsters watching from the shadows had swelled to nearly 24. By the second day, that number doubled. Almost 40 beasts now ringed the dome, serpents coiled around trees, avians perched like gargoyles, horned predators crouched low. The circle tightened without a single roar. All of them stared, all of them waiting. The mana density around Michael had reached the point where even the weakest of them could sense their law stir faintly, as though an unseen teacher whispered directly into their souls. Then came the third day. Close to 50 monsters had gathered. Compared to the first day, this time the monsters around seemed restless. Their breathing was heavier, their claws dug grooves into the soil, and their eyes flickered with a light that was far from calm. Prince and Gale were restless too, though for an entirely different reason. For the beasts, it was hunger for the fruit before them. They could feel that the treasure they waited for was about to bloom, and if they could seize even a fraction of it, their paths would advance by leaps and bounds. That was enough to drive them half-mad with anticipation. For Prince and Gale, it was dread. Though they had laws more profound than their peers, and though their strength eclipsed what their levels suggested, the truth was simple: they were still only 2. Facing close to 5 dozen rank 3 monsters was suicide. Just like Michael had once suspected, his undead were beginning to change. The more intelligent they became, the longer they spent in places outside the netherworld or his storage space, where time either stopped or trickled too slowly, the more individuality they began to emit. It was like now. Before, Prince and Gale would have simply stood still like silent guardians, willing to die before their master without hesitation or thought. But now, they were different. You are listening to a story on Time Drift Stories channel. If you enjoy it, please like, comment, and subscribe so you won't miss the next episode. Their instincts remained the same, but their minds stirred. It wasn't that they wouldn't die for their master. They would do so without hesitation, but now it wasn't like before when they died and that was it. They wanted to make sure that even if they died, their master would still be safe. This was the cost of intelligence. Even without full emotions, it was mimicked by intelligence, and as intelligent beings they became more complex. This had its good and bad points, but it would be up to Michael to decide which parts were good and which were bad. Like that, the third day pressed on, with 50 predators and 2 guardians circling one silent man whose body glowed like dawn. Prince could stop the light but not the radiance. Though it had only been barely 3 days, the situation around Michael had already brought gains that were nothing short of extraordinary. Prince and Gale weren't even fully cultivating. They stood as guardians, suppressing the commotion and holding the dome in place, yet the benefits they reaped were undeniable. 3 days, and each of them had leveled 3 times. Even the monsters lingering outside, waiting for Michael to bloom, had received their own benefits to varying degrees. And this was only the surface reward from the initial overflow. If they took time later to digest it properly, they knew the results would be even greater, even if slightly reduced compared to this torrent. But the point was clear. If these gains were merely scraps, leftovers leaking from Michael's transformation, then how unfathomably profitable would the source itself be? The realization made Prince and Gale tense. They understood, as did the 50 monsters crowding the forest edge, that the man/fruit glowing inside the dome was a treasure. And treasures, once they bloomed, were always fought over. For treasures like this, even if blood had to be shed, it would be. Night fell, and the change was impossible to hide any longer. The light streaming from Michael's body pierced even Prince's layered dome. Threads of brilliance bled outward until the barrier itself began to shine, fractured seams glowing like molten cracks. Then the sky shifted. The once muted heavens suddenly bloomed with stars, brighter and sharper than before, as if pulled into resonance with the man below. Strands of starlight broke free, falling gently from above until they draped the dome in a celestial veil. Every monster watching froze. Their breaths grew shallow. Claws dug deeper into the soil. Not one dared to move, because they all understood what it meant. The moment the light stopped, the fruit would have bloomed. Anticipation tightened the ring around the dome. What none of the monsters knew was that, deep within the starry void, the cause of this phenomenon had already stirred. In the land of origin, Michael's eyes flickered open. For a moment, he didn't know where he was. The last thing he remembered was that strange starry space, the cauldron, the light, the warmth that had dragged him into slumber. How long had he been out? Michael couldn't tell. His mind said hours, maybe a day, but the heaviness in his soul whispered longer. His body felt different, heavier and lighter at once, as though time itself had pressed against him. Startled, Michael realized he wasn't standing. He wasn't even lying down. His body floated midair, suspended as if caught in invisible threads. Panic sparked, but it died quickly when he tried to move and found he couldn't. His limbs were unresponsive, his body paralyzed. Yet his consciousness was clear. Only his eyes obeyed him. Slowly, he turned them upward. There above him, a strange light spilled down. It was not harsh or burning. It was warm. Comforting. Familiar. The sight calmed him even as confusion deepened. And then, without warning, blue panels started to appear before him. Michael Norman has evolved and advanced into a true human. You have grown significantly stronger. Your affinity with the world has increased significantly. Your strength has been significantly enhanced. Your agility has been significantly enhanced. Your constitution has been significantly enhanced. Your intelligence has been significantly enhanced. It didn't stop. The panels shifted again. You have received a new title, True Person. Summary: you have been acknowledged by the universe as a true person, one who has stepped beyond illusion and touched the essence of reality. A true person is a being one step closer to unity with the universe. Effect: your perception of laws has deepened. Insight into universal principles is enhanced, reducing the barrier to understanding laws by 20 Fantram. You have received a new title, Mortal God. Summary: against the natural order, a mortal body not yet divine has taken the shape and resilience of a god's vessel. This title recognizes your defiance of limits. You have received a new title, Mortal God. Summary: against the natural order, a mortal body, not yet divine, had taken on the shape and resilience of a god's vessel. This title recognized his defiance of limits. Effect: physical durability, vitality, and recovery were drastically increased. His mortal body functioned as a pseudo-divine vessel, granting resistance to law-based damage. Another panel followed, threads of light coalescing into sharper lines. You have received a gift, Eye of Truth. Summary: the gaze of a divine person, bestowed by the universe as an acknowledgement of divinity. Only beings who carried a trace of the divine, whether through realm, bloodline, or universal recognition, could awaken such eyes. The Eye of Truth stripped away all deception and revealed the essence of existence. Effect: it allowed him to perceive hidden truths, pierce illusions, and glimpse the underlying structure of laws. Prolonged use might cause backlash upon the soul. Michael was shocked, but he barely had any time to react before the light from above ceased, and his body sank. Not fell, it sank. The supernatural body was a peculiar thing. For example, a frame weighing little more than 70 kilograms, yet housing the strength to shatter mountains, was a contradiction by mundane logic. Yet it was possible. How? Aurora had its own explanation. An acknowledged theory, expressed in different forms across the universe, described this phenomenon. Here, it was called supernatural cells. They functioned in a way oddly reminiscent of fat cells, countless, ever-present, storing and releasing energy in ways the ordinary eye could not perceive. They multiplied with cultivation and grew denser the further one progressed. Of course, there were contradictions to this theory. Yet even with its flaws, Aurora's interpretation still held its own merits. Supernatural cells explained why powerhouses could remain deceptively light, and why weight alone did not dictate might. In Michael's case, however, his sudden surge of strength and lack of control told a different story. His true weight, no, the pressure of his existence, was unleashed. The ground beneath him groaned. Cracks spiderwebbed outward from where his presence sank into the earth. At first, it was faint, like soil shifting after rain, but within moments the dome itself quivered as the ground depressed by several meters. Dust lifted in waves, trees bent toward the collapsing heart, and stones tumbled inward as if drawn by an invisible tide. Outside the dome, the effect was immediate. The very air seemed to warp as Michael's uncontrolled pressure leaked through Prince's layered barriers, rattling the bones of all who lingered nearby. Rank 3 monsters that had watched in patience stiffened. Their claws bit deeper into the dirt, their eyes glowing hotter. Some snarled low, unable to hold back the sound, others flexed wings or tails, striking the ground with anticipation. Prince immediately adjusted the barrier, a ripple of pale light shoring up the trembling dome. Gale's eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the restless horde outside. Immediately, both revealed their true forms. Their humanoid bodies seemed to twist and warp, instantly expanding to their greatest size. A heavy silence gripped the forest. The first to break it was a wolf crouched low on the earth. Its massive form loomed, fur bristling, muscles coiled like a spring. Its fangs bared, and its growl rolled across the ground like thunder. The wolf lunged forward, claws tearing furrows through the earth. Prince reacted first. The dome's floor erupted with a storm of vines. They tore upward with crushing force, thick as towers, lashing and coiling in an instant to catch the wolf's charge. Each vine hummed faintly with his will, thrumming with the law comprehension he had forged in the shadow of Michael's transformation. Gale moved simultaneously in midair. His first attack wasn't mere elemental infusion. No, it was a law skill. Though still raw, still a blueprint etched during the flood of insights, it was unmistakable. His law of severing wind bent into shape, sharper and more absolute than anything he had wielded before. The air itself screamed as his blades of wind descended. Prince's vine struck first, smashing upward and unleashing a wave that wasn't physical at all. The sound carried something deeper. It pierced past flesh and bone, diving straight into the soul. A soul strike, hidden in resonance, that made the wolf stagger mid-charge with a snarl of pain. In that same heartbeat, Gale's severing blades fell. Prince's soul wave and Gale's severing wind had combined, without explicit coordination. The combination tore through a wide space. The wolf reeled from the soul wave, its body collapsing mid-step just as Gale's wind cleaved down. The strike carved through its body. For rank 3 beasts, those who had edged too close, fell without even knowing why. Then something surprising happened. Prince moved with a chilling howl. His first strike had been the soul-shatter howl, a wave that rattled the spirits of all it touched. But what came next was something deeper. The air chilled, heavy with a pressure older than killing intent. The fallen monsters twitched once, their lifeless eyes dim. Wisps of pallid light tore free from the corpses, spiraling toward him. The souls of the slain were dragged screaming into his command, tethered by a law skill he had unknowingly forged after the first. Nether claim. In an instant, those fragments bound to him, bending to his will. Their forms lingered like shadows, skeletal outlines of what they once were, kneeling at Prince's side before fading into his body. Gale's head snapped toward him, eyes narrowing. He had known Prince was strong, but this was different. The dead had become Prince's strength. A wolf of vines and shadows stood in his place now. Prince howled again and it reverberated through the dome. Beside him, Gale did not falter. His severing winds twisted tighter, responding to Prince's soul quake like the second half of a symphony. Together, the two undead moved as one. The battle had truly begun.